My name is Peter Rothschild. I'm the chairman of Friends of the Panzi Hospital. I think I need to get this a little bit closer. Do you hear me well now over everywhere? Okay. And Friends of Panzi is an association that was created 2018 to help to pay for the running cost of the Panzi Hospital. We are arranging this event together with FUF, which is in Swedish, or in English, it's the Swedish Development Forum. And we're very grateful for all their help. You are, of course, here to listen and understand what's happening in the Congo, in the DRC. But we are also very grateful for any contribution that you could do. And there are QR codes. I know they're not, this QR code is only working on the first 3 or 5 rows of seats. But there are also QR codes on the program. So please, hopefully you're generous, and the money goes directly to the Panzi Hospital. The why are we here? Well, we're here because every hour in the DRC there are 48 women that are subject to sexual violence. There are 60% of the women in the DRC have been subject to at least one rape. And 12% of the women are below 18 years. And we want to do something about that. We want to help, and we need support. And one way of doing this, and that's why we're gathering here today, is to understand the connection between these, by the way, please put them off, into flight mode, and electrical cars, everything we need for the digital revolution, and the extraction of minerals and trade of minerals from the Congo, and the sexual violence. So there is a connection, and we want to understand that, and we also want to be able to pose some, or at least discuss some solutions for this. And that's why we have gathered prominent experts in this field. And above all, we have invited Dr. Mukwege, Nobel Peace Prize winner in 2018, with his expertise, passion, which he has shown for many years. Where is he? So please, Dr. Mukwege, you're welcome. And with these words, I leave the stage for Dr. Mukwege and Malou, who will help us with the conversation here today. Thank you. Please.
Before you start your speech, which everybody's here to listen to, I just want to say one practical thing. We're a little bit delayed. So because you got your coffee, and that's good, and the bun, so there will be no coffee afterwards. So we will just continue instead with these very important discussions that we are here for today. So I'll leave the stage for you.
Ladies and gentlemen, first and foremost, I would like to thank the two organizers, friends of Panzi Hospital and the Swedish Development Forum, for organizing this event on the theme of business for peace in the DRC. I'm delighted to see a multitude of profiles in the room, because to address the problems that bring us together today and to find solutions, it is crucial to mobilize collective commitment to develop strategies and synergies and enhance cooperation between states, political leaders, but also with private sector, academia, civil society, and the media. Ladies and gentlemen, before getting to the heart of the matter, allow me to shed light on the serious security and humanitarian situation prevailing in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and particularly in the east of the country, where Panzi Hospital and Panzi Foundation are located. Eastern Congo has been ravaged by war since 1996. At some point, the country was occupied by 9 foreign armies, and a multitude of Congolese and foreign armed groups have committed countless international crimes with almost total impunity. Indeed, this is the deadliest conflict since the Second World War, with over 6 million dead, and one of the most serious humanitarian catastrophes in the modern world, with almost 7 million displaced and 25 people suffering from hunger. This is no longer a humanitarian crisis. It is a crisis of our humanity. Yet this crisis remains largely neglected, and there is an urgent need to launch a campaign for global mobilization and put an end to the suffering of the Congolese people. This is why we are advocating for tackling the root cause of violence, the illegal exploitation and exploitation of mining resources. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a topic I would like to develop with you this afternoon: the connection between the Congo's immense natural wealth and the ongoing conflict. The Congo is often described as a mining El Dorado. Studies by the UN and civil society have clearly shown how the illegal extraction and illicit trade of these minerals fueled war and widespread human rights violation. Let me go back in time for a moment to show how closely the history of globalization and the history of Congo have been intertwined since the 16th century. The slave trade was closely linked to the sugar cane and cotton trade, which contribute to an international economic boom. During the rule of Leopold II, the Belgian king's aim was to do business and make maximum profit from the Congo's natural resources. The dogma of growth led to the worst atrocities. The Congo's minerals also played a pivotal role in supporting the arms industry during both world wars. It should be record that it was thanks to the uranium of Congo that the atomic bomb was made 80 years ago. In the last 30 years, Rwanda and Uganda have been instrumentalized as proxies for the great powers and certain multinationals to step up a war economy aimed at controlling the extraction and trade of Congolese mineral resources and their transport to the rest of the world. Indeed, the globalized economic system is largely based on the mining resources that abound in the DRC, and these minerals have become indispensable for the new information and communication technologies with the rise of computers, smartphones, tablets, other devices that have become part of our daily lives with the advent of the digital age. In complicity with a greedy and corrupt Congolese political military elite, which sells off Congo's mineral wealth, the regime in Kigali has become a hub for illegal trafficking of strategic minerals, despite having very little of its own. Thus, we can acknowledge that DRC remains a constant focal point in major geostrategic conflicts and challenges. But meanwhile, the Congolese population continues to suffer in extreme poverty. Most recently, the group of experts on the DRC, mandated by the UN Security Council, reported that the coalition of M23 and the Rwandan army that occupies vast area of North Kivu in a war of aggression had a monopoly of the fraudulent extraction, trade, and illegal export to Rwanda of minerals from Rubaya. This area is North Kivu is rich in mining sites, which is said to supply over 15% of the world's tantalum production. This has caused the most significant contamination recorded in the supply chains of the 3TS minerals, tin, tantalum, tungsten, in the Great Lakes region in the last 10 years. In fact, according to the UN expert, over 120 tons of coltan are transported every month between the DRC and Rwanda, and these minerals are then laundered in Rwandan production before being exported to the world market. As a result, strategic Congolese minerals either go directly to China, which operates in Africa as a neocolonial force, or transit to Rwanda before being exported to processing in consuming regions such as Europe and the USA. In both cases, the supply chain is frequently compromised, failing to meet ethical, social, and environmental standards. Ladies and gentlemen, there is an urgent need to change course. The DRC is a subject of renewed interest due to the resurgence of armed violence, but also because of the growing need for strategic minerals essential to so-called clean technologies as part of the energy transition to combat climate change. As governments in economically advanced countries seek to move away from fossil fuels, and global competition for access to critical minerals intensifies political decision-making and major corporations are paying greater attention to securing the supply chains of mineral essential to the transition. The issue of access to Congolese mineral with their vast potential for extraction is becoming increasingly significant amid global competition for critical minerals. This competition is driven by strategic rivalry between the Western world and China to secure supplies of metals essential not only for new technology industry, but also the energy transition. The International Energy Agency estimates that demand for mineral essential to the energy transition will triple by 2030 and quadruple by 2040. The pressure on the DRC, the world's leading producer of cobalt, with 80% of the planet's reserves, second largest producer of copper, holder of the world's largest reserve of coltan, and with enormous potential in lithium and other rare earths, will dramatically increase. Therefore, every nation is making effort to secure its strategic autonomy. Following the example of the European Union, the Global Gateway Strategy and the construction of the Lobito Corridor in Angola to facilitate the transport of mineral from the DRC and Zambia across the Atlantic to Europe and the US. At a time when the main raw materials on which the developed world rely to move towards the energy transition are found in abundance in the DRC, we must seize this opportunity to change the paradigm and avoid the humanitarian and ecological disaster brought about by the communication and digital revolutions. Ladies and gentlemen, Sweden is an example to follow, for it has built its prosperity on the sustainable management of natural resources and innovation, while insisting on the crucial role of transparency and governance in building trust and attracting investment. Sweden and DRC share similar natural resources, and while the DRC is in the process of adopting a national strategy for energy transition minerals and fostering inclusive development, a strategic partnership with Sweden can lead the DRC towards a sustainable future anchored on peace, job creation, and meeting the basic rights and needs of its population. Furthermore, while Sweden said yes to the European Union 30 years ago, it also has a role to play at European level, not least in its relations with the African Great Lakes region. Over the past decade, the EU has progressively developed a substantial legislative framework, including the Conflict Mineral Regulation, the Critical Raw Materials Act, and the new Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive that will become effective only in a few years from now. This proliferation of European legislative initiative, whose spirit is partly based on human rights and the environment, following consumer outrage campaign and civil society advocacy, seems to be paving the way for a more responsible and sustainable global business ethic. Nevertheless, it must be remembered that entire sectors of industry cannot function without minerals. For example, demand for coltan is driven by not only by the electronic industry, but also by the chemical, military, and even space industries. Secondly, the only legislation whose effects can be already assessed, that on conflict minerals, has unfortunately not had the expected impact, nor has its implementation been effective. The illicit mineral trade continues to fuel conflict in the Eastern Congo. Finally, the EU has signed in February 2024 a partnership agreement with Rwanda to foster the development of sustainable and resilient value chains for raw materials. While it is widely documented that the Kigali regime destabilized the DRC to plunder these minerals, cynically illustrating a total contradiction with the principle of coherence and the EU's core values, notably the promotion of peace and human rights. We therefore call on Sweden to ensure EU foreign policy remain in accordance, in line with its values, and to demand that the EU assess the effectiveness of the conflict mineral regulation. Ladies and gentlemen, first, with the failure of security and diplomatic initiative to silence guns in the DRC and the difficulty of legal regulating on opaque and mafia-like trade, we now expect the private sector and the business world to assume the responsibilities and to be part of the solution. Over the past 20 years, efforts have been made in the field of corporate social responsibility, notably with the adoption of the UN guiding principle of business and human rights. These efforts are largely based on the do no harm principle, example, not to use, for example, children labor, or not to dump chemicals in rivers. While corporate power is constantly growing, it remains largely unchecked. And it is becoming urgent to redefine the relationship between business, society, and the planet. It's time to move from a do no harm approach to a do good one. This is the purpose of the Business for Peace campaign in the DRC that we are initiating. There is an alternative to sourcing minerals responsibly without going through the Kigali regime, which kills civilians to plunder the mineral of the Eastern Congo, and without going through the Chinese, who don't bother to protect human rights or nature. All this is criminal business. We are convinced that thanks to the business for peace approach, global high-tech companies, some of which source directly or indirectly minerals from those who plunder the DRC natural resources, will do well to get involved and use their leverage in promoting sustainable peace building in the DRC to gain direct access to these same resources in a profitable, sustainable, secure, and ethical manner. A win-win partnership will enable companies to pursue the digital and energy revolution, and the DRC to contribute to the needs of economic globalization in a just manner. The future lies in ensuring that the prosperity of companies is in step with the prosperity of nations, their populations, and the planet. I thank you for the effort you will make to achieve this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and have a seat,
Thank you.
Dr. Dennis Mukwege. We have met before. What was it, fourth time?
Thank you. I think it's...
Yeah, 2 times in my
fourth
talk
time.
show and then 2 times on stage. And what you told me before about the hospital and your work there and the women you have seen that comes to you as patients, could you please give us a picture, sort of, some of these women that you are so engaged in because you have helped them so much?
Yeah. Yeah, the situation in Congo, really, I can say that it's going worse and worse, because now the last report of the UN said that only in 2024, 123,000 women were victims of sexual violence or sexual based on gender. And this is terrible. It's just 1 woman is raped in Congo each 4 minutes. And this is a report of the UN. It means that many women didn't report to the UN, but it must be more than the 123 women. And at the hospital, what we can see is the increasing of children who are victims of rape. For example, now our maternity, we are delivering around 3,200 women per year, and 30% of the women are children.
And what age, more or less?
12 years, 13 years, 14, 15 years. And you can imagine when they come to the hospital at this age, they don't even know what happened to them. And we need to take care of them. And I think that this way of treating children in the conflict is just only because we are not able to address this conflict in a right way. So the people who are raping, they are trying to do everything because all that they can do is going unpunished, and there is a total impunity. But what really is touching me is to see how children can be destroyed in this war.
Could you explain to us what the connection between raped women and children, as you told us now, what has it, the connection with the minerals?
Yeah, it's clear that the connection with mineral is now, if you can read all the report of the UN, we know that the mineral of Kivu is just crossing the border by the M23 and the Rwandan army. Rwanda has become really a hub of these minerals from the Kivus. And the problem is that the population is just leaving their village and let this village to the armed groups who are exploiting this mineral for their own without paying any tax. And this mineral are crossing the border. So the war in the Eastern Congo is not a war about religion, it's not a war about ethnic conflict, it's a war about the control of these strategic minerals. And today we know that these minerals are going through Rwanda to get the international market.
And the women and the children are victims because it's a way of destroying societies or villages.
It's not only to destroy society, but it's a way also. It's a cheap weapon. Because when the family can just witness the mother or a child to be raped in front of the family, this is something that more of the people after are just leaving their village, because when it happens, they have the feeling that they have nothing to do in the village or to defend. They lose all their honor, and they lose all the relation in the village. When a father is raped in front of the children and her wife, he have impression that he's not at all a father. And it's the same with the mother. And children also, when they are raped in front of their parents and the parents can't defend them, they have impression that the parents have no role to play.
And when they leave their homes, then they can dig for the minerals.
Yeah, exactly. And I think to destroy the fabric of the society is the most important things that this kind of atrocities can do. And most of the time, the population, they are just leaving their village. And when the village is empty, it's empty to be exploited by the rebel groups. And we can see the result on the international level that Rwanda is exporting the minerals that they don't have enough in their own territory.
Could you tell us, because you told me before, in what conditions some of these women came to you, are coming to you every day, or children, and what can you do for them? Because this is your aim subject.
Yeah, at Panzi Hospital, when we started in 1999, our goal was really to fight against maternal mortality. Obstetrician, so this was really my goal, to fight against maternal mortality. But unfortunately, when we opened the hospital, the patient who came at the Panzi Hospital, the first patient didn't come to give birth. She came because she was raped in a very, very bad way. So she came to get the treatment at the hospital. And at this moment, for me, it was clear that this is someone who loses his mind, who can do things like that on a woman. To rape is already a terrible thing that can happen to someone. But to rape and destroy the genital, I could never imagine something like that.
You've never seen that before as a doctor?
Never. And I just thought that it's an isolated case. But today, we have already treated more than 83,000 women at Panzi Hospital. We are using what we call the holistic model. It's to take care of them medically, psychologically. We have a program to support them economically and socially. And when they want to go to justice, we have a team of lawyers who can help them to make the file and just accompany them to the justice. And this is what we are trying to do. I'm so really, I'm so surprised to see the capacity of women when they went through this program, how they can be able not only to take their own destiny in their hands, but also to be actors of change in the community. And this is really a wonderful that we can see in the society, that women are fighting for not only the right, but the right of their children, the right of the community. And most of them, after to pass through Panzi, they become activists of human rights.
Some of the women, I think, are educated now in the hospital, and they work with you in the hospital. Yeah,
we have many victims who really, because in our program, when they're adult, we have a program for adult to give them a new profile so they can do their own business. But for children, most of the time, we are giving them opportunity to go back to school. And now we have women who, after the training to go back to school, some of them became, for example, anesthetists. So, and when I asked, for example, one of them, why you chose to be anesthetist, and she said, you know, when I was raped, it was a terrible thing, and I was just thinking and tried to see what will happen to me, and I get the impression it was painful that the only time that I feel that I come back on life, it was when the anesthetist took me and started to treat me. So I want to be anesthetist because I don't want to see another woman to suffer as it happened to me. Mm. And I found this, it's wonderful because she could think to revenge, but she's thinking that I will be here to protect other women to suffer as myself I suffer. We have women who are now, for example, lawyers, and for them it's because we didn't get justice I want to be lawyer because I want really to fight for the right of women. Some of them are teachers. And I can say that when you talk with them and see how their way to choose what they want to become, what is amazing is that most of them are choosing the way that they can be helpful for others. And this is really something that giving me hope for even my community. I know that Congo is a broken country, but I believe that with women who are not thinking about only themselves, about their own power, but how they can rebuild this fabric of the society, I'm sure that Congo one day will stand up, wake up with women.
I think that's worth an applause. You were running for president, and what you didn't, you're still a doctor, you're in the hospital.
Exactly.
But what, if you have become then the president, what was the special aims that you would focus on?
Yeah, you know, I spent 25 years begging others to implement the human rights, to implement the rule of law. And after 25 years, I just get the impression that the one who is doing it are human as me. Why I can't do it myself? Because begging and nothing is happening. So I decided to run for president. And I don't have any kind of to regret what I did, because I think that this was really an experience that bring me to understand many things when it comes to the way that the world is rolled by the business and so on. I think that in Africa, to be a president, you need more than only to get a goal and to think about your population.
What do you need more?
Yeah, I think that as we are talking about business, you have the impression that all the people who are benefiting of this corrupt and the system, they will never accept that Congo can be led by someone who can think that the Congolese people are also deserve more than what they are getting today. And it's really, I think when I did my speech, I talked about the history of Congo. You know that in 1885, Congo was given to one person, the King Leopold, as his own property. And this was not a fact of, hazard. It was done because Congo must stay in this position of weakness. So everyone, it was called independent. For me, the meaning is that everyone could come and exploit Congo. And it's what is happening in Congo since 1885 today. And Congo can't get really a strong man to lead it, because there maybe business can't work as the world wants it to work. But the reason to be here is I believe in the business for peace. I believe that we can do the business in another way. I believe that we can do the business and respect the human rights.
And I know that you want to come here to listen to what others' experiences in business for peace.
Absolutely. I think that to be here is really, I know that you have good experts on this question, and I want to listen. I want to also, if they have some, because I believe that no one here can really accept what is going on the ground. And there are many possibilities to do business that can really, where companies can get a good profit and secure and ethical and ecological
at the same time.
But the big problem is that they lack some time of information can lead people to do bad things. But today I think that there is a possibility to not only to do not harm, but also to do good.
Thank you so much, and you will have the last word here too. So you go back and sit down and listen to others. Thank you so much. So we will continue, and you will be able to listen to people that have been in Congo and their experiences, and we have also asked them to focus on the positive solutions. And I will welcome up on stage Henrik Råsbrandt, journalist from Aftonbladet, which is one of the investigating journalists that I really think you should follow, because you've done so much and a very interesting reportage. Have a seat.
Thanks.
And also Staffan.
I think you actually mixed up the name.
I made a mistake. Sorry.
Don't worry, Marie.
Staffan, you are Staffan Lindberg, of course.
Yeah.
Staffan Lindberg, Aftonbladet. And Henrik Råsbrandt, where are you? You are the ambassador, former ambassador in Congo. I'm so sorry. Please have a seat.
Thank you. Is this? I'm not sure if it's turned on or if we can be heard properly.
I think it's turned on. And then, Staffan, I would like you to start, because you've been in Congo. You've been reporting about the what is happening around this mining and children and other people. What you have seen that are really suffering from this mining. Could you please explain what you saw, or give us a picture?
Of course. Actually, it was just reminded now that it was a different occasion that the doctor was in Stockholm talking about cobalt, and I listened to him, me and a photographer, and we felt that we really needed to go to the Congo to see for ourselves. This was some years back. I'd been to Congo like a few times before. I'd been following the case of the UN expert killed there, Saida Catalan, written a book about it. But for us, you know what you were saying at the time of the risks of this cobalt boom in the south of the DRC, well, we just felt as journalists we need to go there. So there's been a few years since I was there, but I've at the same time been covering like many other places in Africa, going there, written a report and trying to focus on, you know, the humanitarian cost for the green transition. So it's not only in the Congo, but in many other places you can see that people are really suffering to get hold of the minerals that we really need. Just got back last year from southern Madagascar, where they mine the mica that is needed to insulate these batteries. So problems are everywhere, but for now the Congo, but there's a broader picture.
Could you give us some examples what you saw?
Yeah. So what we see here is this guy is called Jean-Paul Moulanga. Well, he's a father of four. He's working in one of these what you call the artisanal mines in the Congo. So you have the regulated mines that are quite often owned by foreign countries, but you also have this informal sector that is spreading everywhere. Thousands of mines like this. So what we saw when we went to Kolwezi was, you know, these open pits everywhere. People just been starting to dig, and you got like 20 meters down. And as you can see, Jean-Paul, what he has is no safety equipment whatsoever. You know, no helmet even, and what is not a ladder going down. So he just like pushes his hands and his feet towards the wall of this pit, risking his life every time he goes down there. And then he ventures down 20 meters and he starts like digging. So it's really like, it's in a way it feels like going back to what I imagine a mine would be like in medieval times, but at the same time it's so ironic to see this green future mineral that we all need for the green transition being mined in this way. It is really shocking. So what he's saying, he needs to work there to support himself, but he's just like every night he has these nightmares about, you know, the sound of the packed earth moving, the fear of a collapse, the constant fear of dying. And
these things happened all the time?
All the time. We went to the hospital. It was like a war hospital with the dead miners and injured miners everywhere. So it's really, it's a really horrible place. You can feel there's like a smell of earth, of sweat, because they're working so hard, bringing up these bags of rocks to the surface. It's really, really, really bad conditions and quite shocking.
When we were discussing over the phone, you said that it's really a dark picture, what I've seen and what I'm going to show. But I asked you to focus on positive solutions. What have you on your mind?
Well, as a journalist, I kind of look for
You're focusing
problems.
on the
Yeah,
problems.
exactly. But you know, of course, what is, as the doctor was mentioning before, I mean, there is a possibility here. I mean, of course, we wrote this story. We went to like Apple, Volvo Cars, Tesla, and all these users of this mineral to ask them, because we could trace the supply chain and say, well, there's no way that they can exclude cobalt being mined under these very hard circumstances. Even we could see that there were children out in these mines collecting rocks and so on. Just bringing everything to the same Chinese purchaser who would mix everything. So we could just see there's no way that you can exclude this, you know, cobalt being mined under these really bad circumstances. But we don't tend to get answers. So they keep referring to policies saying, well, our policy is not to allow child mine minerals and so on. So I guess like the solution is to push harder, because these are consumer brands that we all use. They are really sensitive to what we think, and as consumers. So we need to push the stores. We need to push harder. Well, I guess that
the
would be
power
the
of consumers.
Power of consumers, and the power of, as a journalist, investigating these supply chains. Because if you do investigate, if you establish a link between what we're seeing in these pictures and all the way back to the company, to Apple's products, or whatever it might be, Samsung, you know, it is really, you know, I can feel as a journalist that journalism can make a difference there.
But you still have an Apple
I do, yeah.
phone.
Yeah, it's how
So
it
this
works.
is what's going on. And also, of course, this is resources for Congo that could have been used for getting better conditions in the country as well.
Yeah.
So, Henrik Rosbrand, you have been the ambassador in Congo, and what could you are the representative of the government, of course. There, what could you do? What could you? What did you see, and what could you do to help?
Well, I think first, can you hear me? Yes. First, thank you very much to the Swedish Development Forum, and also to Friends of Panzi, and to Malou and Professor Mukwege for inviting me, since I left my post in August 2024. So I'm happy to be back, of course, and to continue to talk on the DRC, which is a country very, very dear to me. I think what we try to do from an embassy perspective, which is nothing new, but we try to continue on such an approach, was a kind of integrated approach where we looked at development needs and what we could do on the development side, but also on the humanitarian side, but to link that to political issues, but also what we also try to reinforce during the last years, also to business-related issues, and to see how we could get these different issues together, maybe not always, and maybe not all of them all the time, but to see how we could get an integrated approach in order to first to show that Sweden was there, and also the development cooperation and also humanitarian aid were increased during my time in the country, which also helped, of course, in a way. we changed a little bit the focus of the development strategy to get it more maybe focused on current issues on the agenda, such as a new focus area. One of the new focus areas was on climate, environment, energy, and those related issues, just as an example, but also link that to other important issues which have already been mentioned, such as human rights, democracy, rule of law, etc., and then also on business-related issues.
Did you see any, because you're a diplomat and words are very important in your work, but did you see practical examples of change?
I think I did during that time. It's a long process. It's a political process. But I think what Sweden always tries to do is also to see the positive steps. There are some positive forces also in the DRC, and I hope that Dr. Mukwege is okay with that. But you have to see them also, I think, and you have to try to support them, because there are also at the same time many forces that don't want change. They want to keep the system as it is because of personal, political, financial interests. They don't have any interests in changing. But if you try to see those interlocutors and those forces and try to support in different ways, you can maybe continue to a small change, but it takes time. Obviously, it takes time. And no one can really do everything at the same time, of course.
Did you visit the Panzi Hospital?
Of course, many times. So I've had the pleasure of...
What were your impression? What did you see? What's your experience?
It's a tremendous work that Dr. Mukwege and the Panzi Hospital does on the ground, and I've had the pleasure of visiting the hospital, I think at least twice, maybe 3 times even, and to see the work on the ground. And also there the importance of this integrated approach to these victims and all the horrors that they are victims of, and also in what way you are trying to help.
Does the Swedish government do enough?
I think it's a good question. I think maybe no one never does enough. But I think what we are trying to do is to try at least to continue to contribute, trying to raise up. And as I said, when I was there, our development cooperation was substantially increased. And also Sweden is today, if you look at the Swedish humanitarian aid, the DRC, at least when I left a few months ago, the DRC was the country in our system that still received the biggest humanitarian aid. So I think not just to say that being the biggest humanitarian contributor or development contributor, that will be enough. But I think it shows also the importance that Sweden is putting on those issues. But just to come back to, I think it's very important also to have this integrated approach when you look at development, peace. It's very important, which has already been mentioned, that many different actors contribute. It may be Sweden as a contributor, but also, of course, the government itself, I mean, in the receiving country, development organizations, international organizations, civil society organizations, and also, as I said, also the private sector, which has a very important part to play. And that's where you come back to this integrated approach of between development cooperation, and also the private sector. And there we also tried to do a few things through different actors. I know we have the Swedish NIR here today, who will also talk about that, I think. But where I think Swedish companies, for example, have a lot to contribute. We should not underestimate in the Swedish model that you have a lot of things like human rights development, social dialogue, and so on, where also Swedish companies can contribute to a better environment.
Staffan, you're a critical journalist. What do you say about these things?
Well, I think I mean, at this time, probably as you mentioned, I mean, the Swedish foreign aid is radically decreased in many countries. Embassies are being shut down in other African countries. So unfortunately, it seems to be a time of more about keeping, you know, the Swedish engagement that is still there rather than just closing everything down. I mean, these are times where Swedish priorities seem to be changing. So we'll see what that means for Sweden and the Congo.
So what do you think about the private sector? I mean, we have invited a lot of people from different companies here. What could they do combined with
They could do much more, and they need to know that, you know, every time I travel to the end of this supply chain, whether it's like African mines or, you know, textile waste being shipped somewhere or factories in Asia, wherever I go in the other end of this supply chain, there are always problems, massive human rights violations in one way or the other. So if they really, they need to do much more to just control the supply chains to be a force of good. If you are to, you know, benefit from minerals from extremely poor and corrupt places and countries, or benefit from having production in extreme low income countries, well, at least you need to do the work, you need to be on the ground. Like when we were in Kolwezi, we didn't see a single representative from any of the major end users there. I don't think that is good enough. You need to be there, you need to do, no one will be perfect. There will always be, like, you know, some bad things happening along the way, but they need to do much more to control these supply chains, from my perspective.
Do you like to comment on that?
Just to say that I think, of course, presence on the ground is very important, and the continued, I mean, dialogue. And I think no one is, I mean, I think we all agree on the problematics, on the problems, on the challenges. And I think what we try to do from our different perspectives is to find out how we can contribute in the best way, and hopefully together in our different roles we can find a way of, and come back to that which I think is very important, to try to support also the good forces in a country that won't change. I think that is very important, and I think there we can all contribute in one way or the other.
Thank you so much. I think we will move forward with just that kind of suggestions that the next speaker will talk about. So I think I need one more. Let's see now. Before we do that, I should invite one person up on stage, a person that has been in politics for a long time, and it's interesting to her point of view. Nyamko Sabuni, välkommen upp på scenen. Varsågod. Det är ju så intressant. Du är inte längre partiledare för Liberalerna, det tror jag alla har uppfattat.
Det hoppas jag.
Ja. Och du har nu gått in i ett helt annat område. Du ska få berätta om det. Som också kanske har sin förklaring till varifrån du kommer. Att du är väldigt engagerad i de här frågorna som är problem i Afrika helt enkelt, men också möjligheter. Men jag skulle vilja börja med faktiskt att fråga dig, för du var ju på Panzi sjukhuset som jämställdhetsminister.
Det var nog mandatperioden innan där.
Ja.
Under Magnus Wernstedts tid som ambassadör. Och tror jag i starten av Panzi sjukhuset, där bara några år tidigare hade Dr. Mukwege startade sjukhuset och bildat och började bli verksam, så åkte jag ner. Jag har under hela mitt politiska liv försökt undvika att involvera mig i frågor som har rört Afrika. För att inte bli anklagad för att ägna för mycket tid åt min forna kontinent och mindre åt inrikespolitik. Så att jag har väl aldrig gjort någonting på det området mer än att jag just behövde besöka Kongo och Panzi sjukhuset efter det krig som pågick. Och som Mukwege sa så var det ju flera afrikanska länder som var i Kongo och förde kriget, och ibland så benämnde man det som det tredje världskriget. Även om vi i Europa inte beskrev det så fanns ju folk runt omkring som benämnde det som det tredje världskriget. Så jag åkte ner för att studera vad som hände, hur kvinnorna var drabbade, och det var väldigt svårt att uppleva det där. Det var väldigt svårt att komma med en svensk delegation och gå runt i sjukhusen och se alla dessa hårt skadade kvinnor i chocktillstånd. Och samtidigt försöka fokusera på vad doktorn berättar om arbetet och ansträngningar. Så att bilderna släpper inte riktigt. Men jag kom hem med den kunskapen. Jag gjorde inte speciellt mycket åt det, men jag vet att svenska regeringen är duktiga, precis som det beskrevs tidigare här, på just humanitär hjälp, på bistånd och så vidare. För egen del nu sedan jag lämnat politiken så har jag tänkt hur kan jag på bästa sätt vara med på den resan som en hel del afrikanska länder är inne på, det vill säga utveckling, affärsmannaskap, fler människor i arbete, växande medelklass, välutbildad befolkning. Den resan vill jag vara med på och bidra till, därför att är det någonting som saknas i Afrika så är det privat kapital. Det finns institutionellt kapital, det finns bistånd, det finns länder som Kina som kolonialiserar Afrika på ett annorlunda sätt än Europa, men det saknas privat kapital till entreprenörer, och jag tror verkligen att länder utvecklas och välståndet byggs med stöd av entreprenörer. Det har Sverige visat, och som Mukwege sa, Sverige skulle på många sätt kunna starta partnerskap med Kongo för att Kongo ska kunna lära den resa som Sverige gjorde för att komma dit vi är idag. Därför att det är ganska mycket som förenar dem. Både tillgång till naturtillgångar och så vidare, men också den relation som man har haft i många år med bistånd och humanitär hjälp. Att där kunde man göra mer.
Om du är lite mer, för det här är ganska nytt det du håller på med nu, eller hur? Mm. Kan du beskriva vad det är du gör idag?
Jag har tillsammans med ett antal partners bildat Sabona Partners Investments. När jag lämnade politiken så började jag fundera på vad jag skulle göra för att vara med på det som hände nere på kontinenten. Och då upptäckte jag att det är just det här gapet, finansieringsgapet för entreprenörer, som var kanske det viktigaste. Och det är klart att Afrika är en kontinent. När man säger jag gör affärer i Afrika så är ju det sanning med modifikation. Vi har ju ändå, för att göra affärer så krävs det en trygghet, det krävs relativt mogna institutioner. Kongo är ett väldigt komplicerat land, det är väldigt stort. Själv talar jag inte franska, mitt modersmål är swahili. Vi är få från östra delen av Kongo som talar swahili, vilket gör att vara verksam i Kongo för mig känns övermäktigt. Jag har valt att vara verksam i delar av Afrika där det finns en mognare demokrati och där jag ser utvecklingen gå framåt och där det går att investera och göra affärer. De länderna tillhör samtliga forna brittiska kolonier. När man läser av Afrika idag så kan man se forna franska kolonier, alla är i uppror idag. För att Frankrike aldrig lämnat ordentligt de länderna. Belgiska Kongo, det går inte att tala om det för att med den historia som vi hörde i inledningsanförandet från slaveriet, kolonialismen med kung Leopold, kolonialismen med Belgien och sen idag med alla naturtillgångar som alla är intresserade av och Kinas närvaro, så är Kongo lika oroligt som det alltid har varit. Tittar vi på brittiska kolonier så lämnade de snyggt. De lämnade länderna, de erbjöd möjligheten att vara kvar i det här så kallade Commonwealth-samväldet. Det är handelsrelationer, det är möjligheter till utbildning. Idag har vi de mest välutbildade folken i forna brittiska kolonier. Det är Kenya och det är Ghana där vi är verksamma. Och så finns det många fler, Zambia och så vidare.
Men
de är stabila.
Det låter ju deppigt för Kongos del, men då undrar jag om du tar den modellen och det du ser ändå som du håller på med, skulle inte det gå att applicera med Business for Peace har vi pratat om till exempel?
Absolut, Kongo har ju så väldigt mycket resurser att erbjuda. Bara det vi pratar om gruvnäringen, den utgör ju idag 25% av Kongos BNP. 95% tror jag, 90% i alla fall av deras export. Kongo har så mycket råvara, som material, både som kolsänka men också som alla pratar om, det är ju framtidens material att göra saker av. Kongofloden skulle kunna producera energi som kan försörja större delen av Afrika. Den odlingsbara mark, 10% av världens ännu icke använda odlingsbara mark finns i Kongo, för att inte tala om alla mineraler varför vi samlas här idag. Så det är klart att det finns möjligheter och förutsättningar att göra affärer i Kongo. Men jag tror inte det är möjligheterna som en liten spelare som vi är och att vi är ett nytt bolag kan klara av. Men det finns ju många stora svenska bolag som behöver dessa mineraler, som med alla sina resurser skulle kunna etablera sig där.
Om du ställer
att det skapas jobb.
Ställer det på andra benet då som politiker, vad krävs då för att det inte ska gå i den riktning som vi ibland ser med korruption och annat? Vad är det som krävs, tänker du då, i Kongo? För svenska företag till exempel som etablerar sig.
Fast jag tror om bolagen och länder ska vänta på att korruptionen ska upphöra innan de är verksamma, så kommer det aldrig inträffa. Vi har ju korruption också i Sverige. Så att korruption finns överallt. Frågan är bara i hur hög grad. Jag tror att man måste börja etablera sig och också börja ställa krav för att korruptionen sen ska upphöra. Och när vi talar om de här leverantörskedjorna, det vill säga konsumenter ska trycka på, företagen som behöver mineraler ska trycka på. Problemet är ju när kanalerna, alltså de som säljer mineralerna, blir färre och färre, idag nästan bara Kina. Ja, vem ska du vända dig till om du nu behöver mineralerna till dina produkter? Vem annars ska du köpa av? Då går det inte heller att åstadkomma respekten för mänskliga rättigheter inom värdekedjan, för det finns bara en leverantör. Snart finns det bara en leverantör i Kina.
Vad ser du för möjligheter?
Ja, vad jag ser är att Europa och USA måste engagera sig mer i Afrika som en partner, inte som en givare. Man brukar säga det. Den handen som ger är alltid över den handen som tar emot. Det går inte att bilda partnerskap med hjälp och stöd och bistånd. Partnerskap skapar man med hjälp av handel och hjälp av affärer.
Men bistånd är väl också nödvändigt för ett sjukhus, inte minst.
Vi har ju precis sagt att det är jätteviktigt, och Sverige är humanitär stormakt som vi brukar säga. Åtminstone ett tag till framåt. Så att det är jätteviktigt, men vi bygger inte välstånd med hjälp av bistånd. Vi löser akuta problem som mest. Och där har Sverige gjort stor nytta. Men ska man komma längre med situationen i Kongo så krävs det modiga bolag, modiga affärsmän. Det krävs resurser för att göra det.
Vad tror du om konsumentmakt? Att man kräver att det finns certifiering. Till exempel att jag vet när jag köper min telefon att det inte är den här typen av mineraler som...
Ja, men exakt den dagen du slutar köpa och använda iPhone så kanske det blir som konsumentmakt. Hur många är beredda att inte använda iPhone eller någon annan telefon för den delen? Det är ju ingen som är beredd att inte göra det.
Men jag menar mer om det är certifierat så att man vet att de mineraler som finns i de här produkterna...
Ja. Jag förstår precis vad vi pratar om. Jag var hållbarhetsdirektör på OF, Sveriges största teknikkonsultbolag. Jag har följt hållbarhetsarbete inom väldigt många olika branscher som konsulter. Och vad jag försöker säga i problemet är att om inte vi får fler att verka i Kongo och fler som på ett schysst sätt utvinner mineraler så att vi som konsumenter kan kontrollera vem gör det på bästa sätt, så kommer det att fortsätta vara problematiskt. För att det finns inget intresse av en leverantör, i det här fallet Kina, att ägna sig åt de här leverantörskedjorna, respektera mänskliga rättigheter och omställning och så vidare. Det intresset är ju inte så stort, därför att de lyder inte vår kontroll. De lyder inte under EUs regler för transparens och redovisning. Därför behöver Europa och USA engagera sig och involvera sig i vad som händer i Afrika, mer än bara bistånd.
Tack Nyamko Sabuni, vi ska prata precis om det nu. Ja. Och då så ska vi få en stol till, för nu we will focus on what the European Union can do, Sweden of course, and we have a few people here that are experts on this. Alice Blondell, where are you? Here. Welcome up on stage, Swede Watch, and Henrik Hallgren, who is trying to put on his microphone, and We will also invite Joachim Wolfeng. Where are you?
Yep.
So have a seat. You have listened now to Nyamko Sabuni, and if I start with you, Alice, could you first explain what is Swedwatch?
Swedwatch is a human rights NGO that focuses on the responsibility of companies and their
exactly what
exactly and the
Nyamko
potential
Sabuni was
positive and potentially negative impacts on human rights.
So what are EU doing right now? Because there are things going on right now.
Yes. The European Union passed a directive called the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive that Dr. Mukwege mentioned in the beginning here. And that is one of, if not the first, multinational directives on mandatory human rights due diligence. Yes. And it's now under transposition, so countries have approximately 2 years to implement this into national law.
And what do you think? Are you an optimist when it comes to these regulations?
Yes, I've seen this field change quite a bit over the last 25 years since I've been in this field. I have not seen enough strides. I was in Eastern Congo 20 years ago investigating mineral trafficking and arms trafficking and how it underpinned the conflict in there and the region. And there as well, there was a particular individual who was convicted of 18 counts of war crimes and crimes against humanity. And it was well known that this was very much based on control over mining areas. But then at that time, and also then, sorry, because we're talking about and we're shocked and horrified, and some of us are not surprised, but it's not good that we're not surprised by that it's as bad as it is now. This person was convicted for the first time in ICC history of sexual slavery. And this is for things that happened 20 years ago. And we're talking about what's happening now. And voluntary, fine, and we've seen an increase in company engagement, but not an increase enough in engagement with rights holders, civil society actors that represent their interests. So in terms of the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, I'm trying not to, can I say CSDDD? In terms of the CSDDD,
it's a new law.
It's new, but it's not the new one in Europe. France passed a Duty of Vigilance Act in 2017. Germany passed one in 2021. So it's not new. This is a trend that's happening. And companies that are not panicking with the CSDDD are ones that have already started implementing it. And this CSDDD has come, we've seen, on a push not just from consumers, from investors, from companies, from states, from public procurers themselves. What we're concerned about with the CSDDD is that it has been watered down from what many hoped it would be. Downstream is not included, investors are not included, but we're hoping that this will be included and that will be more in line with the UN Guiding Principles.
What could you see then in Germany and France that had already had implemented this?
There's been a strong focus on accountability, transparency, and it's not just those two countries. Canada is also talking about it now. And there's a global implication in terms of how trade is done. And what we've seen also, and there's a benchmark that's done approximately every other year, and the one that was done recently in 2023 that looked specifically at the extractive sector, which is what we're talking about now, and the garment sector, which are two of the highest risk for human rights and environment. What we saw, and they were graded on 100 points, is that only 3 companies of 110, only 3 made it above the 50 mark. Most were under 20%, under the 20-point mark. And most of those, the majority of those that were under 20 were under 10. In terms of extractives, 47% of the companies graded or against this criteria, 47% were under 20 points of 100. So in terms of peace building, in terms of doing more, no, enough is never enough, regardless of if you're a civil society actor or corporate actor, an investor, a public procurer, a state actor, there's always more, because clearly it hasn't worked so far. And when we were speaking a little bit earlier with some of my colleagues here, what's missing is the dialogue embedding due diligence in company practice. And regardless of what due diligence laws come, we'd also like to see, I hope, that beyond, it's not just about laws, it's about practice. So regardless of what the due diligence law ends up becoming, because it's in the process now of potentially being watered down, despite that we continuously think more and think, what can we do to make this rights-centric, not a box-ticking exercise, so that we go away from what I would hear before when I was doing these investigations, which was, presenting with evidence. We'd hear, but we didn't know. It's not our responsibility to know. With the guiding principles, that shifted. It was a massive shift. Companies had a responsibility to know. If it becomes mandatory, that's also different. But we're also hearing at Swedwatch a shift in the discourse, a shift in the narrative, which is positive, which needs to continue, which is away from this, it's okay as long as, and this is behind closed doors, so I'm not necessarily saying it openly, but it's okay as long as we're better than the competition. But if your competition is also performing under 20 points of 100 on something as critical as human rights, the human rights abuses that we've heard about today, don't compare yourself with someone else that's performing under 20 points. Compare yourself continuously improving, leaps and bounds. And we have seen transformative change is possible in a short period. When companies are involved, when they do get engaged, and when they use their leverage, companies, public procurers, investors, it makes a big difference.
So you're an optimist?
A careful optimist. It's important we don't get jaded.
It's a small step forward, or is it a big?
A small step forward, but we really have to change the narrative and stop saying, let's not make it too complicated, let's da-da-da-da. It's, we really need to push more, and we need to make sure that rights holders, those representing their rights, that they are consulted. There is no due diligence that works if you're not engaging with the communities and with the rights holders in DRC, for example. There is none.
Joachim, could you, I know that we have asked you to focus on positive things or things that we could do, solutions, but you have seen a lot of very tragic things as well. Could you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and that's
maybe you should explain what you are doing, what you're working with first.
So I work for the Swedish development organization, Diakonia, but then I also have a long background in the Swedish export industry. And that means that I'm also doing some of the, how should we say, breeding areas. So I'm, for example, one of the representatives of a supporting body to the European Union that is called the European Partnership for Responsible Minerals, where we are actually meeting both governments and companies and civil society organizations. So when we discussed here, for example, are the drivers for companies like Apple, Intel, BMW, I actually meet them regularly in this kind of meeting and have discussion with them. And if we go back to that, I would say first I think it's, I mean, I have seen a lot of the reality in the mines. Maybe I could say too much sometimes. It's like others have described here, it's a terrible experience, and still I'm just a visitor there. But to see what could be sometimes described as death factories and know that this is actually connected to us, it's hard. Then what I try to do is, of course, to change the frustration into some kind of action and to use the resources we have as a development organization and the knowledge I have myself about business and technology. So this is where I'm also very interested in and following the discussions on what kind of tools can be developed to create some kind of...
So could you explain what kind of tools can we develop?
Yeah, this is right. So first, of course, when you develop legal systems for example, when you say that you should be able to trace minerals, of course you need tools to do it. How should it be done? There has been a system that is known as bagging and tagging, where you basically are looking into mines. If they're handled in a good way, you try to follow the material from the mines to the smelters and then to the producers, which is of course complicated, as has been described here, because a lot of it go to the Far East, to China, which is a country that doesn't really care about where the material are coming, and then it may be coming back to producers and industry who make products, and then you will have customers who actually demand them to be fair. And I would actually say, by speaking to the large companies, it's actually, I think that it was not a debate here, but I think we should not underestimate consumer power, because all of the big companies are actually driven by being better, by actually trying to present products that are made by fair materials. Then it's very complicated to follow the change, and this is something that we daily try to focus on. But what we can see, for example, is that this bagging and tagging system, that was a very manual system from the beginning, has now been, that we are trying to use modern technology there. However, what is dangerous here is also that technology is not magic. There was a time when I went to seminars and workshops and discussing with technicians, and everybody said, okay, if somebody mentioned blockchain, this is a good seminar. The problem is that of course, just because you can't copy a blockchain code, it doesn't mean that the blockchain code is the same as minerals. You need to apply it to connect it to mineral in some ways. And this is what is happening. So we are trying to find ways to apply this technology that you can maybe trace the minerals to the smelters. Then you have other solutions that is for example, something called a mass balance market, where you're checking what goes in and what comes out. And if you combine this, you can actually even work with these problematic countries in Asia, that you can say that, well, we actually have, if we have 10 tons of fair material going out, we have a problem if 15 tons of fair minerals are sold, because then you know there is something happening in the chain that you can trace. And this is a general question. Whenever I try to speak about these methods, and I could do it for hours, I should be very careful here, because I'm also an enthusiast in these kind of solutions. The question I always get is that, one, who should we boycott? Should we stop buying minerals from Congo? And this is something very important, because whenever we speak to people in Congo, to the civil society, they actually say, no, we don't want to be boycotted. We want to be our resources to be used in a way that it empowers our country, that it comes back to the population. And we want to be treated as real humans, our mining workers in the mines. That is the answer to the question, should we boycott? The other question is, oh, but isn't it easy to cheat? Couldn't you just change these tags, or you could hack the systems? And well, yeah, like I said, I also have a technical background. Of course you can cheat. But that is not a game stopper. Because whenever you are setting rules, whenever you're putting demands in the supply chain, you actually have something to measure against. So you can have organizations like my own, or Swedwatch, who is like a bloodhound there, that could actually find the, how should we say, disproportionate, where things are not going right, and expose it. And this is also really important, coming back to some hopeful signs, that we have all these companies who actually want to do good things, who can use the technology, and who are trying to improve, to give something back.
Could you give some good examples? We have talked about, I mean, Tesla, Apple, and as bad examples. Can you give some good examples?
No, I didn't say they were...
no, but they are mentioned here all the time.
I would say there's a lot of dimensions to that. I should not how should I say, make commercials for any of the companies, but I would say I meet these companies, I speak to them. I would say that there is many of them who, by customer demands, are actually doing really good things, trying to follow the minerals, and a lot of, there is, in general, this is being done in a good way by the brands that we have spoken about. Of course, there will be problems about this. I can point them out as well. But one of the things, for example, that is, if we speak about the problem with not serious actors coming in, we have companies who are coming into the market that are, for example, breaking human rights, they're breaking laws. They might also break environmental laws. And one of the problems comes back to the corruption, that it might be cheaper for a company to pay off inspectors instead of following the rules for doing protecting water, for example. That is something that happens very often, that the mining destroys the water. And then, of course, we have created a problem there, because if you have a lot of people living in an area and the water is destroyed, because the company is breaking the law by the method of actually taking the cheaper solution to bribe the authorities. Then we have a lot of good examples. Often it's seen as the civil society and the companies are two conflicting parts here. Instead, we have a lot of good examples where we are actually working together. So when we from the civil society can empower local populations to stand up for their rights, and maybe also, which is a work actually that is NIR is also being excellent at, creating a dialogue between the communities and the companies, we can have really good examples. I'm just coming back from Colombia, where I actually followed a process where the civil society support the local population in a court process against a company who had broken the law by corruption. And the interesting thing is here that first, this is very efficient, because basically the company panicked when there were real lawyers coming in supporting the population, and when they did see the possibility that maybe journalists like Staffan or others could come and write about it, they got really scared. So those things are happening, but this is also crucial for the companies that want to follow the laws, because we also have something that I love to talk about, that is called the level play field. That most companies who are being serious, they also want to have equal competition. They don't want to fight against companies who doesn't pay taxes, who doesn't follow the law, who can basically do whatever they want. And if we can make the rules being followed, if we can support authorities, if we can support the civil societies, and this is also something where we need development work. You need actually organizations who has a trust among civil society. You can take, in DRC, for example, it's quite interesting to follow the churches. We have church organizations and churches who have been working there for more than 100 years. They know the context. They can do these things. And it benefits the population, the people of Congo. It benefits the business. It also benefits
Joachim, I know that you can speak for hours, and all of you are very much engaged and involved. But let me give the word to Henrik Hallgren, who is Director of Operations. And can you explain about the organization? What are you doing?
It usually takes about 90 minutes to explain what NIR is.
No, you don't have 90 minutes.
No. The International Council of Swedish Industry, NIR, is an organization that is run as a non-profit association, uniting the largest Swedish multinational enterprises like export companies and also the Swedish export cluster in the form of SEK and EKN, who provide export financing. But the work we do is completely funded through development cooperation. So we are a hybrid at the nexus between the private sector and the development cooperation. That was, I think, the short reply to your question.
If you combine what you've heard here now.
Yeah, it's good to hear, because Joachim has spoken for a long time but taken a lot of the stuff that I was going to say. No, I mean, I think come back to the question you asked Alice instead. I mean, do we see, will these legislations and these developments, will they change some things? I think it's fair to say that there's plenty of reasons for pessimism. like you say, going back, like a doctor said, to 1885, you can argue that nothing much has happened since 1885 or 1908 when the colony was established, or 1960 when there was, independence. I work mainly in Latin America with sustainability issues related to mining. In Bolivia, silver mining started in the 1500s. It was the richest, Potosí was the richest town on the continent. It financed the whole colonial adventure of Spain and later of United Kingdom. Today it is the poorest province of the poorest country of South America. And obviously, on a macro level, you can say that nothing much has changed. But I will jump back to the last, say, 13 years or so instead, when we have the establishment of what you mentioned, the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights. Since they were adopted, quite a lot of things have happened. The most important thing being now that they are being taken from being voluntary into legislation, like we just talked about with this CSDDD. I'm glad you spelled it out, so I don't have to say it. And if you look under the hood, I think, the reason why it's being a legislation is that the voluntary principles were not enough. But at the same time, there are a lot of things that have happened. We have seen, for example, with our member companies, when a legislation comes up, a new legislation, many of the companies, some of the companies are immediately positive. They see this is going to be a competitive advantage because we are already sustainable. But many are skeptical, and I think they are skeptical for the reason that you don't know what this will lead to. And
in terms of economy and
yes, in terms of the conditions imposed on you as a company and on the competition. So most of the companies, all of the companies that were skeptical at the beginning turned out to be positive and driving these developments now. And of course that's important because when you have legislation, putting a lot of new legislative requirements on the company, it will create the same effects as perhaps or it risks creating the same effects as perhaps the Dodd-Frank Act and these things did, a divestment. You see a certain risk, you want to be clean, you divest. And this is, I think, particularly true in the case of these legislations when it comes to smaller companies that have not had these procedures in place. What is important, though, and that is also something mentioned by the doctor, how do we change these things? And also mentioned by Staffan, look at the supply chain. I think that is one very important message. And you mentioned, obviously, the role of China, the role of Rwanda as a gateway. But you can also look at what companies are part of these supply chains. Often we talk about, say, companies in automotives or in IT that are sourcing minerals into our phones. These companies normally are not importing or sourcing minerals directly from mines in the Congo. They are indirectly sourcing these minerals. And if you take a large company, they might have a number of thousand suppliers of these different raw materials. And on those chains, there are maybe 5, 6, 7 tiers before you actually get to the mine. There's a different type of company if you are a direct sourcing company of minerals from a mine site. Then you can put a completely different type of due diligence. You can go to the mine and say, well, I have this demand. I want you to explain how you're doing with your community outreach, for example. And a third category, which is interesting in the case of Sweden and mining, is that Sweden has for historical reasons, has some of the biggest suppliers of mining equipment to the mining industry. And they are in almost every large mine across the world. They are in a position where they sell equipment to a company. And you would argue, and we have argued for a long time, that would be a potential leverage point to change things for Sweden. But the business relation you have with a large mining company, when you are trying to sell them some equipment, say 3 machines at a time, does not allow you to have nearly the same type of leverage as you would have if you were directly sourcing for that company or if you were that mining company itself. So I think this is very important to understand, and I think that's also where the key comes. We need to create these kind of leverage platforms that I mentioned also in the UN Guiding Principles on the Business and Human Rights. And here it is, just to stop talking now, but I will also just tie back to what you said. I think the key here is to cooperate on the supply chain. I mean, from the equipment suppliers to the sourcing companies. And I think the idea of having a better presence in the regions like Kolwezi or Katanga, where these minerals are mined, is probably a good one. But that also requires, I think, a presence of the official Sweden in this case, the European Union. There is a chance, I would argue now, with these new legislations and the Global Gateway Initiative, where you are actually committing resources, somebody else's resources mostly, because you're going to raise funds through banks, private banks and state banks. But there is a possibility there to provide a truer partnership with the countries like the DRC in order to have this oversight, and also just to just finish with this this thing about consumer power. I think consumer power requires that you have alternatives. Today you don't have alternative supply chains. And I think these cannot be driven, this is my personal opinion, these cannot be driven by consumer power. These have to be created from alliances between the industries, the local communities and the civil society representatives, and the government agents.
Thank you so much. I think we are running out of time, so I have to stop there, but I will give Dr. Mukwege a chance to have something to say. You have listened to all these solutions and positive perspectives, so please enter the stage. And thank you so much. So what did you pick up, and what did you think about all these positive perspectives that you heard now? Or did you focus on the negative ones?
Not at all.
Not at all.
Yeah, I want to thank all for the different interventions. And really, I can say that we need to keep hope, because if we can see what is happening in our world, I'm a little bit worried. And when I was a medical director in a countryside hospital, my hospital was attacked, and patients and staff were killed in the hospital. And at this moment, it was an aggression of my country. And
Mm-hmm.
There.
No,
There. It's better.
Or is it? Yeah, now it should be.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah. Yes, I was a medical director in a small hospital, Lemera Hospital, in the countryside, when the war started in my country. And when my patients and staff were killed in the hospital, and it was an aggression because the people who killed the patient in my hospital came from another country, member of the UN. So I thought I go directly to see the special envoy of the UN, and I told him what happened to my staff and the hospital. But I'm still waiting to get the answer. And the families of the people who were killed in the hospital until today, 25 years after, they're still waiting to get answer. And I think that today I heard a lot about law. And the worries that I have is that when the rule of law is replaced by the rule of force at the international level, and you have the impression that, yeah, when a country has the power, they can do everything, and even get the support of countries that we can say that they are democratic countries. I'm worried about it. And I think that reflecting on this, my big question is how we can fight to get back what we got after the Second World War, was the security, the collective security for our world. And I think that if we destroy this foundation of the collective security, other things will not be sustainable.
But
so it's very important for me to push that we should respect the rule of law in what kind of matter we are discussing. And when it comes to the minerals, I think that we have today we have good regulations in many countries, but to implement these regulations and to follow these regulations is a big issue that we are facing. And I'm worried that people prefer the rule of force in spite to promote the rule of law.
So what would you say to the audience here who are, a lot of people here are representatives of business, because you believe in business for peace. You told me when we were on our way here.
Absolutely. I believe in business for peace because I believe that companies have a leverage. They have the possibility to use this leverage on their own government. And as you asked me, now I know that politicians have always companies behind them. And these companies can get a big influence on government to push the government to go in the good direction. And today, if I'm here, is really to say, in Congo, for example, we can build a business where Swedish or European can come and exploit mineral in respecting the rule of law and respecting human rights and just get benefit in what they're doing. But the big issue is, my impression is that the one who are getting benefit in this mine today, they are giving impression that it's impossible to work in Congo. And this impression is that what everyone knows, that I can't go there. It's very dangerous. There is no governance and so on. But all these things can be built when we know that Congo have, for example, 80% of the cobalt. And we can't talk about energy transition or climate change without cobalt. So we need to do this effort to say it's not only China or Rwanda who can access to this mineral, and we know the ways that they are accessing to this mineral is not a clean way. So for me, to be here is to say we have rules, we have to respect these rules, and even in Congo, these rules can be implemented and be respected and get the business be done by everyone who wants to do a clean business and just support his company and also support the local population.
And before I will ask Peter to come up and say a few words, we all wish you hope for your tremendous work in the hospital. Good luck with that, because you are helping so many women, and they are trying to change the society, as you told us, and the children as well, of course.
Yeah, but they need us.
They need us.
Because when we send them back home, in the situation of where there is no security, they are coming back again and again at the hospital. As I said, now we are treating more children who are themselves born after rape. And this is a terrible situation. You have the impression that there is no end. So they need businessmen to really push on, for example, EU, to don't go on supporting a country who is doing aggression to plunder minerals in Congo. These are something that can be done. And this is only to respect the rule of law. But if the rule of law is not respected, there is no way really to get a solution. So if you want really to support the women of Congo, what they need, the most things that they need is peace. And if you ask them, what can we do for you? They will answer 100%, we need peace, because we know how to feed our children, we know how to cultivate, we know how to walk, to go to fish and so on. We know to do everything, and the only one thing that we need is peace. And this peace, I'm sure that if business, private sector can come in and push, it's possible to build peace in Congo. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh, Mado, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
It only remains for me to thank you all for coming. And don't forget that we also are, the hospital needs support in terms of financing as well. So now you know the QR code and you know where we are and you know our website, so please support the Panzi Hospital and Dr. McVeig's fantastic work there. So a little token, thank you very much for coming all the way.
Thank you so much. At Panzi, we can't do what we are doing without the support of our friends in Sweden, the friends of Panzi and other organizations who are supporting us. I want to take this opportunity to say thank you a lot for what you are doing to save lives and supporting women of Congo who really need you to back them in their fight for freedom and from peace. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Wonderful. Thank you.